I'm in a hold on. Okay, go.
We are
Sorry.
live. You can tell we're
We are
live.
live.
We can tell we're live. I press the button
Frank
and
pushes the button. He does not really care what I think what's going on the other side of the camera. He's pushing the button. He's on
I got the go
he's like
ahead.
union he's like a union laborer here, man. He's on a time clock and he's pushed the button and we're going. So let's go.
Again, the live wonderful world of podcast. Please subscribe, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the ALG podcast. This is Frank McCaffrey. I'm joined by ALG President Rick Manning. Rick, man, I'll tell you, there's no shortage of news out there right now. New standards for cars that come out of this whole shift in economy that comes as a result of this coronavirus. Can you please explain how this is actually going to benefit American car makers?
Well, it'll benefit consumers as well as car makers, but primarily consumers. Here's what the Trump administration has been working on for like 2 years. The Environmental Protection Agency and the Department of Transportation have jointly been creating a change. President Obama's administration had put new CAFE standards, which meant average fleet mileage standards, on automobiles and trucks that were essentially unattainable, that the goal was to hit them by 2025. And the fact is they were unattainable. And the objective was to force everybody into either electric cars or public transportation, because you wouldn't be able to afford to get a car that was bigger than a go-kart. And there are a lot of other concerns. The average price of a car was going to go up about $7,000 for a new car. The safety of the car was going to be significantly driven down because they would not be as there wouldn't be as much steel in the bodies and the like to try to reach those standards. They'd have had to make it a lot less safe if you got into an accident. So you'd have lower survivable rates from the Obama standards. And so the Trump administration took a look at it and they said, wait a second, we've got to come up with a balance here. And they balanced between what the old number was and basically split the difference. It's still, by the way, the number that they've settled upon for 2025 is still higher than the fleet average today. So we'll continue to see improvements in terms of average mileage per gallon that cars get. We'll still see additional electric vehicles on the road, and as less expensive electric vehicles become available, if they do become available, there'll definitely be some practical ability to say, okay, well, we might get there. But with the gas prices being what they are today, all the financial incentives, economic incentives, are on the side of gas-consuming vehicles. And so these lower standards, actually, these higher standards that are lower than what Obama wanted, but higher than what exists today, which create a balance, those standards are going to make it so our automakers in Detroit and elsewhere will still be able to thrive, and we'll still be moving forward towards a more fuel-efficient economy. And those are two good goals, and they don't have the draconian impact that Obama's standards had the intent of having, which was to basically drive the internal combustion engine into obsolescence.
Okay, now this a lot comes as a result of coronavirus, and we're questioning now how widespread it is. We hear Chris
Right.
Cuomo of CNN has been tested positive. I just literally, you probably heard me. I just got a message from a friend of mine in the news business. He said that 3 people tested positive in his newsroom, including the lead anchor, and that's in Atlanta. So how widespread is this? It continues to grow. How much of a concern is this going to be, just as far as our safety? How do we contain our safety? I mean, if so many people are getting it, I mean, is there a way that we can make sure our families are out of harm's way?
Well, let me just give you a couple of thoughts here. First of all, it's regrettable when anybody gets it, and obviously when somebody who is the brother of the governor of New York, who is also an anchor, well-known anchor, although nobody watches his show, he's still a well-known anchor in name, and obviously with the obsession that CNN has had on this, it's going to make it even more pointed. The challenge is that everybody needs to understand a simple thing. When back, and I said this a month ago, when they talked about flattening the curve did not mean that people weren't going to get it. What it meant was it was going to progress more slowly and throughout, and so we wouldn't get massive spikes in terms of people who have the coronavirus. That's A. So it is anticipated that most people are going to get it in some way, shape, or form. The second point, we are seeing a lot more people who are being diagnosed as having it because more people are being tested. And the more people who are tested, you basically capture people who might not be showing any symptoms. You capture people who essentially would have gone under the radar otherwise. So the more available the test, the more people you're going to get who test positive. The question is, what's the mortality rate going to be with this virus? And in a place like Germany, it's well under 1%. And here in America, it's about 1.3% right now and dropping. It's even 1.3% in New York, 1.3, 1.4% in New York, where 50% of the test takers are testing positive. Elsewhere, it's about 10% test positive. So what we know, what we can surmise from that, is that the disease is pretty widespread now. The difference is, and what the big unknowable thing that our public opinion leaders should be getting a pretty good grasp on by this time, is what percentage of the people who are diagnosed end up actually needing to have, who gets serious. It doesn't just act like a cold. So how many people are asymptomatic, don't show any symptoms? How many people it affects them like a cold or a bad chest cold? And how many people does it effectively put in the hospital? So far, it appears the number of people who are put in the hospital is a relatively low percentage of the people who get it. And the people who die from there is another significantly lower percentage. And the death rate is directly relational to your age and your relative health. So if you're somebody who has chronic bronchitis and is over 60, you may have some concerns if you get it. If you're somebody who is 40 years old, not to say that people who are 40 years old don't die from this, but it is much less likely that you will. So should you be concerned? Absolutely. Should we pay attention to it? Absolutely. Should we do what they're saying and stay at home and not attempt to stop the spreading as rapidly? Absolutely. And let me give you the simple reason why we want to stop this from spreading so rapidly. Just yesterday, the Trump administration, the FDA, finally approved the hydrochloroquine, equine or whatever it is.
I've been struggling with that. I was looking at that.
Yeah, hydrochloroquinine or quinine.
Let me see if I can figure this out while you're explaining. Let me see if I can figure out the pronunciation here.
Pronunciation, good for you. When you get it, so they just approved that for use for treatment. Why is that important?
Hydrochloroquine. Hydroxychloroquine.
Hydroxychloroquine. Yes. Okay, so all that means is there's a couple of there's hydrogen, oxygen, chlorine, and whatever makes up quinine. That's the combination. But that's chemistry from like when I was 12. But the point on this is that that's just been approved in record time by the FDA for using. They say they don't have normal clinical trials, but they've got enough anecdotal evidence from doctors and others, healthcare professionals, not just here, but around the world, saying that it is an effective treatment. They don't know how effective, but it is an effective treatment. So that's just, and we are getting massive amounts of doses of that that have been released, and many more that are going to be created. So that is number one. There is something that's been approved. Secondly, this weekend, the Trump administration announced that they were going to allow for trials on the plasma therapy. What the plasma, I don't have the technical name, but the plasma therapy is essentially people who have recovered, and more people have recovered than have died. Remember, a lot more people have recovered than died, and have been pronounced to be free of the virus, but survived it essentially. So you have people who have recovered, they take plasma from them. And the belief is that treating people with that plasma has antibodies in it, which will effectively help people fight off the effects of the virus. It's effective treatment in other fields. It's effective treatment in cancers and the like. And so it's believed that this will work. So that's been approved for cases that get serious. The point being, as we move forward, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to you're going to hear about who are going to be infected. That's why they've asked you to stay at home for a month. We're going to see an increase in deaths, and that's what the president said just yesterday, and the Surgeon General said it last week. So in the next couple of weeks, we're going to see an increase in deaths, and then we're going to go over the hump. And hopefully, what will happen at that point is we'll begin to see a decline in number of cases. In the interim, what I'm hoping the CDC is doing, what I'm hoping the FDA, now I guess CDC would be doing this, is that they're getting tests from people who don't report any symptoms in a random way, and so they could determine how many of those people who don't have any symptoms have the virus but are asymptomatic. By doing a study like that, they can determine what extent of the population has had this disease already and didn't even know it. And we get a better sense of how far along we are to having something called herd immunity. And so that's one of the things they're looking at, is every one of their extrapolations in terms of the number of deaths, and they said up to 1 million deaths, are based on information that's incomplete. And the incomplete information, as Dr. Birx said on Friday, they don't know how many people get the disease and never show any symptoms. And so that is a key element. And it's one of the reasons why they want us all to stay home, because you may have it and not know it, and they never know it. But if you're going around, sitting on your neighbor's porch and talking to them, your neighbor can get it from you. And they would get it, and they never know how they got it because you never showed any symptoms. So that's one of the reasons they're having us sit at home and do this, be basement dwellers. And so so it looks like we're in for another month of this, and all we can do is just sit there and pretend we're British, get a stiff upper lip, and deal with it. Pretend you're a millennial. Who doesn't want to come out of their basement ever. So, it's really hard. Our economy is suffering greatly. We're going to have a lot of people unemployed. We're going to have a lot of bad economic news on top of this. There's reason to question whether or not we'll be able to come out of it. We know that Nancy Pelosi is already putting together another package of stimulus. We know that the K Street crowd is anybody who didn't get money in the last one is now belling up to the bar saying they want money now. And you're going to see a pretty grotesque process legislatively when Congress gets back in the middle into late April, where they try to do basically bail out a bunch of states, bail out pension funds, bail out even green energy providers are asking for money. It's crazy that people are asking for money. So so these things become Christmas trees, and the one thing you can do is contact your congressman right now and say, I'm really depending upon you to make certain that any additional funding is strictly related to this and not giveaways for special interests. I think that's really important. If it isn't directly tied to bringing our economy back, then it's probably not something we should be doing. So that's if you wanted to, that's what you could do with Congress is contact. And obviously, they're all sequestered in place all over the country as well. And so, it's, but they all will, have their phones forwarded. So it's important to keep communicating with them.
And Joe Biden's had some accusations made against him recently. He in theory should be the voice of the left, but he struggles with that role because it seems like he's struggling to function properly. Do you think that he can possibly do something that would be better than what Trump has been doing? I mean, has he been going on record? Was he saying anything in January and February that was better than what Trump was saying? Is he winning voters in any way with how he's been handling this coronavirus crisis?
No, the former vice president is most of the suggestions he comes up with are things that the president has already done, or they're really bad ideas. An example of a really bad idea is he wanted to use the something with which the president actually activated for the first time since the Korean War, but he wanted to use a defense act that allows for the president to dictate to industries specific things that they need to be producing. He wanted to use that for a whole broad series of different things that he thought needed to be done. And the fact is, those things are being done without using it. The one instance where the president has invoked it was to try to force General Motors to produce more respirators, more things that stick down the tracheal tube. And to produce some of those. And because GM came back and said they could do 6,000 in like 100 days, which was, 70 days too late and about, 10 times fewer than he was hoping to get out of them. So he basically said, no, you need to do more. And that's a reality. One side note on that, there's been some reporting that a lot of the people who make machine parts for the automakers in Detroit are very concerned that what GM is going to do, and perhaps Ford as well, Ford and GE, who have combined in making these, is that they're essentially going to have the Chinese make them and then import them from China, which is exactly the opposite of what we're trying to get done. So so they'd actually leave the U.S. manufacturing machinists out of the process. And use Chinese suppliers, because ironically, GM has a lot more Chinese suppliers than they do U.S. suppliers right now. They took the stimulus money that they got when they were bailed out, and they essentially took their balance sheet, which was a zero in terms of having any loans or black marks against it, and they invested money into building Chinese factories. And so they could enter the Chinese market with a vengeance, which they did. And they haven't been importing cars that they make from China, but they're a big player in the Chinese market. And so they've really put their focus on China in terms of their marketing. And what they sell here are they try to sell Silverado trucks and higher end vehicles. They tried the Volt, which didn't take off. They then have gone to an all-electric version, but the electric battery stuff's all made in China. So they really don't have as many parts vendors as they used to here in America. You would think that Detroit would be awash with them, but they really aren't anymore. And so the president's sitting there saying, hey, get busy, and hopefully what will happen is that they will choose to use U.S. manufacturing vendors, so we can continue to make those life-saving equipment, and we won't need to have any, the government do anything, do the takeover stuff. By the way, which I 100% oppose. Okay, just so you're clear, the president should not have mandated GM to do anything. He could have shamed them, which would have had the same effect. But by invoking the act, he effectively sets a precedent of mandating businesses to do something that's deemed in the national interest. And who knows what future presidents might do to to abuse that authority. And by opening the door to it in this crisis, he's opening the door for other crises which might not be as serious. In fact, probably won't be as serious, because hard to be much more serious than a pandemic that the worst case projections show 1 million Americans dying. So given that, that's a pretty serious situation, and he wants to have ventilators made so we can prevent that. So that's basically the critical thing. Then what Joe Biden did, he wanted to use that act to take over industry a lot more aggressively. That's the only place where Joe Biden's really disagreed with anything the president has said, and he's just wrong on it. So it just goes to show all the good ideas are taken. So Joe Biden is busy searching around for bad ones.
Yeah. And again, we see a struggle to function. I believe it was last week when he was giving his online speech, and he said that the most pressing issue we have in America today is climate change. I mean, we have a pandemic, it's shutting down the economy, it's shutting down people's lives, people are dying, and he says the most pressing issue is climate change, which is, I'm sorry to say, a made-up issue, and it just shows that the guy is very, very detached, and a lot of people...
Oh, he must have spring allergies, because, when spring comes around like it is right now, and all the pollen's in the air, climate change has a real impact on my nose itching and things like that. So, maybe he has spring allergies, and that climate change of going into spring and causing him to have his eyes water, his nose run, is somehow infecting him or causing him problems. But and let's face it, I don't. It's becoming more and more talked about in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere, that the Democrats are maneuvering to try to replace Joe Biden at the Democratic convention or before. And, some people aren't going to like that. People who got out of the way so Joe Biden can have a clear path against Bernie Sanders, or not, who ran for president, aren't going to like it if they're not if they're not considered to be his replacement. And, since the news, the mainstream media news, I hate to call them that, the network news.
Yeah, the once mainstream media.
Yeah, the once mainstream media. The network news outlets have basically made Governor Cuomo a star, in spite of the fact that he's also a guy who keeps saying things that Trump's done and says he wants to do them. But they've made him into a star, a voice of reason. Until he demanded 40,000 ventilators when he was storing 4,000 of them and not telling anybody. Before people found out that he'd closed 8 public hospitals while he was busy giving health care to illegal aliens. Those little things, as they come out, people are going to take a second look at Cuomo and say, oh yeah, we remember why we didn't like him.
Yeah, and he's had a few other things on his record.
But he's going to have a very sympathetic story with his brother, getting the disease, and any travails that he gets, it's going to create a very sympathetic narrative around Governor Cuomo fighting for his brother's life, kind of stuff. And I'm not discounting that. It obviously is very scary, but the media will use that, and the left will use that politically to benefit him. And so it will be people are going to get a portrait of Governor Cuomo that will be highly sympathetic at a time when they're highly emotional and willing to hear sympathetic stories and stories of heroism, even false heroism. So it's going to be interesting, and I don't think Joe Biden is particularly relevant right now, and as a result, he's having a hard time breaking through the media. And he's probably the most irrelevant presumed Democratic nominee for president ever.
I agree. Yeah, you don't hear much about him.
And that's why I don't think he's going to end up being the nominee. They would be carving up space for sound bites from him saying things that sounded good through the media if he was going to be the nominee. Because remember, the first objective of the media is to take down Trump. Yes. That's their first objective.
Yes,
that's our only objective. And given that, if they thought Biden was the horse that was going to do that, he'd be seen as the rational spokesperson and a calming source and all those kinds of things. And they're not playing him that way. So I don't believe the media believes that Joe Biden will be the nominee.
Okay, now we're gonna keep this short, but we just want to again remind everybody something you probably already know, but we just got to say it. Please stay home, be safe, wash your hands, don't put your hands in your face. All the things you've been hearing, because this is a very serious disease. It is spreading. We don't know what kind of damage it will do. Kind of hoping this evaporates soon, and we can look back on this as a learning experience. But it could be something much worse. So
well, let's just be smart. Okay, we've been given some marching orders. Stay at your house unless you have to go out. You've got to get medicines, you got to get food, those kind of things. Hopefully actual masks will be on the shelves shortly, so people don't hoard them, so people can be wearing masks. If you have masks, wear them already. And the objective, the mask isn't necessarily to protect you from other people, it's to protect other people from you, because if you cough into the mask, you're stopping any kind of coronavirus from heading out through the mask, because you're stopping the water droplets. So so in a lot of respects, wearing a mask is to protect others, not yourself. But that means it's hopeful that other people will be wearing masks as well, so that they have the capacity to protect you from them. So, but just be smart. Be smart. Eat well. Pray.
take your vitamins.
Take your vitamins.
Do jumping jacks at home.
Do exercise. Do all those things that you always say. If I just had time, I would do this. Well, you got time now.
Yes.
And for those of you who are working from home, continue to work from home. Continue your work, because it is really, really important that Americans keep at work as much as possible. And for those of you who have to go out to your work, be smart, be safe. It's wherever possible. I know in grocery stores they put up glass or plexiglass screens between the people who are the checkers and the customers. They're wearing
that started
gloves.
down here in Texas, by the way, with HEB, the grocery store. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but.
No, that's right, and so we've got that up here in D.C. as well, and so there's those kind of protective things that are happening out there. There are people wearing gloves. If you have gloves, you should wear them as well. Take hand sanitizer with you and sanitize your hands regularly if you do have to go out, and just be smart and safe. And if you feel poorly, contact your doctor and have them tell you what to do, because let's be clear. People get sick from other stuff besides this coronavirus, COVID-19. And so you might get sick from something else that you actually need to see a doctor about. So don't be shy. If you get sick, contact your doctor. Even if the symptoms don't match up with COVID-19, you're still sick. So, be aware. We do know that the regular flu kills about 40,000 people a year. Don't be one of those people who, I don't have COVID-19 because I've got this, but then you end up with pneumonia from the flu, which is the same net effect of having the COVID-19. So if you get ill, contact your doctor. And there's lots more tests now. We've tested over 1 million people now. Just the instant tests that they're doing, there's going to be 50,000 of those instant tests given a day, where it's 5 to 15 minutes to get the results. So that means just with that one test, in the next 5 days, you can have 300,000 of them, or 250,000 more tests. And we're going to see a lot bigger numbers because we're testing everybody. So we're testing a lot of people. And so just be cool, relax, and don't panic.
Okay, well, we just wanted to, again, wish everyone well during this time, and just know that it's a good chance, probably better chance than any, that America comes back strong. So
let me give an ask here real quick, Frank.
Yeah.
I may have an opportunity to be on the phone with some high-ranking man. It sounds like you got a velociraptor in the background.
Some days when you have a 3-year-old, it feels like it, but yes.
I may be on, I will likely be on a phone call tomorrow with some very high-ranking White House officials. If anybody has any questions you would like for me to forward to the White House in advance, if you want to email me at rmanning@getliberty.org.
Yes.
That's rmanning@getliberty.org. Any questions you have, I will be looking at my email this afternoon, and this afternoon being Tuesday, and we'll see the emails, and I'll sort through them, and we'll seek to get those emails through so at least I get a private answer, if not one publicly on the phone call with probably 25 other people. So send me those questions. I'll happily pass them along, and hopefully maybe we'll even get an answer. So
I do
I'm
have
offering
one.
that to you.
I actually have one that I would like to ask. Do you think that our government could push the Chinese government to forgive our debt as a result of this? I actually sent that. I gave that message to our senators down here, Cruz and Cornyn.
I think a class action suit against the government of China is perfectly legitimate, and it's they're suing us for $2 trillion right now, so we can sue them back for $2 trillion, because that's actually more than the debt they own, and that is at least the cost of the latest bill, which was 2.2 trillion.
Yeah.
So suing them for a couple of $1 trillion, you'll never collect it, but it is a statement to them, and hopefully a statement to businesses who use Chinese forced labor in China to make the products that we buy here. So, it's a good statement to the Walmarts of the world who basically buy a lot of Chinese products and have supply chains in China. It's good news. It's good message to Apple, which builds a lot of their Apple products in China.
Yeah.
So there is value to it's good. It's a good message to GM, which we already discussed their ties to China. So yeah, there's value to asking these questions. I will bring that question to them. Frank, I don't know if it'll be answered, but I will bring that question to them.
Yeah.
If you put it on the email to me at rmanning@liberty.org.
rmanning@getliberty.org. Okay.
That's right. So, and with that, Frank, let's let people go. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right. I'll see you, everybody. Be safe.